From what I've seen is that he hasn't done his job.
You know how many teams would fire their current coach just to get a shot at Dan Campbell coaching their team? I understand where you're coming from. I just think you're stupid.
Moving on from college football, we gotta go to the NFL for a little bit. There's been one coach in the NFL who we've been talking about a lot. He is known around the league as one of the best coaches in the league, but from what I've seen is that he hasn't done his job. He hasn't taken him far, and that is Dan Campbell. Don't get me wrong, Dan Campbell's a great coach. I love him as a coach, but I think that this year might sound absolutely insane is Super Bowl and bust. Purely because the past couple seasons, they even though he with all the assets that he has on his team, I feel like he should be taking his team to the championship, to Super Bowl. Just simple as that. Don't get me wrong, he's a great coach, but I feel like that in this present day NFL, you need to bring a team to a Super Bowl.
Okay. My opinion is that you're an idiot. Just plain out, right and simple, right? So, if you go back to when Dan Campbell originated on this team, right, which was, if I'm not mistaken, 2019.
Nope.
The Lions went 3-12-1, Derek. 3-12-1, all the way to setting a franchise record, mind you, this year with 15 wins. And you're telling me next year, if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, you fire him? I think you're stupid. This guy went 15-2 this year with pretty much the whole year, second and third string defense. Not to mention, he was in the best division in football, where two other teams went 14-3 and 11-6. And they went 6-0 in the division. In no way, shape, and form is next year a do or a die for Dan Campbell. You know how many teams in this league would kill for a coach of his caliber? This guy 4 or 5 years ago took the Detroit Lions as the worst team in the league. A perennial loser. By far the worst team in the league. Couldn't even watch them because you would have agita and you would want to throw up. To being by far the best team in the league this year with second and third string defenses. I just don't see how you can, any way, shape, or form, even make the assumption that he should be fired next year in a Super Bowl or bust year. I get it. You want to see results, and that's fair, right? But at some point, you have to look at other factors. If the Detroit Lions had a lot of their defensive players, I think they win this game pretty easily. Because Washington's defense wasn't great. And Detroit's offense is still electric. It's going to be a little bit difficult of a year next year on top of that, because not to mention, you're going to have to do free agency and whatnot. Every single one of his coordinators has left. So he's going to have to create a whole new coaching staff all by himself now.
Don't get me wrong, Dan Campbell is a great coach, but obviously with the way the NFL is nowadays is that your system, if it's not running properly or not leading you to championship games, you're done. That's how it is nowadays. Unfortunately, that's how it is. For example, even bringing it back to my favorite team. In 2018, the Eagles won their first Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. Fast forward to 2 years after that, he got fired because he wasn't producing. It's just how it is. At the end of the day, there's nothing Dan Campbell could do besides all he needs to do this season is lead his team to the championship game. He has the assets on his team. He just needs to actually follow through with his assets.
Look, I understand where you're coming from. I just think you're stupid. I'm sorry, you can't justify firing a coach who wins the division, right? You just can't. Do we think realistically the Lions are going to be front runners next year to win the NFC North?
Dean, the NFC North is a tough division. They have the Packers and the Vikings, two very hard teams.
And they went 6-0 in that division this year. 6-0. And they are the best division in football. 3 teams over 11 wins. 3 teams in the playoffs. All 3 teams eliminated in their first game of the playoffs. Look, I get what you're saying, right? We're in a very result-centric society where if you don't see the results, you have to be doing something wrong. And that's just the way it's looked. In the Eagles scenario, Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl and was in one of the toughest divisions in all of football. This is a division we're talking about, the NFC East, that hasn't had a repeat division winner in 17 years. And they went to Nick Sirianni. You're telling me they wouldn't be better off right now if they just kept Peterson rather than go to Sirianni? I think you can make that argument. Sirianni is not that great of a coach, and he is surrounded by insane talent. And Peterson won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles at quarterback.
God bless you, Saint Nick.
Oh, Jesus. Look, my point is, I get we're in a very result-centric society where if you don't win a Super Bowl in a certain amount of time, especially when you're this good consistently, that people are going to start asking questions on whether you should move on or whether the team should move on or make changes. I think there's other avenues on the team that could be changed rather than the head coach, who is conceived by many around the football league to be the best head coach in the league. Right? There it's saying something that almost every single one of your coordinators, offense, defense, defensive lineman, linebacker coach, are all going elsewhere because they are coveted in the NFL. And that's because they're under Dan Campbell. I think the Lions would make an enormous. I think, and this isn't even a bold take, the Lions would rather, and they should rather, move on from Jared Goff before they fire Dan Campbell. I just want to see a year. And look, this is the NFL. This is life. Injuries happen. Shit happens. I'm not trying to make any excuses. But this guy was down to his third stringers on defense for the majority of his defense, right? Pretty much the whole secondary and a lot of the defensive line. So I think they need to do a lot of conditioning this offseason, maybe make some moves here and there. They're obviously going to hire a bunch of new coordinators to go under Dan Campbell within the system. I do not think his coaching is an issue. I think, if anything, it's personnel, where you have to stay healthy, one, and two, if you're not healthy, you're going to have to prepare for that.
How I see is that, and this might be crazy to say, is that some coordinators make coaches look good. It's for all you know, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn could leave, and they could be, and Dan Campbell could show his true colors. It's Don't get me wrong. Obviously, the two running back personnel is great, but I just think that it's possible because sometimes in the NFL it does happen is that he's overshadowed. No, his coordinators overshadow how good he is.
I think we're going to find out next year because Ben Johnson's going to Chicago, who is supposedly an up and coming team, right? Once again, once again, in the best division in football, where that division is crazy. So we're going to see what he could do with Caleb Williams. And then you have Glenn going over to the Jets, who the Jets are a whole nother issue, right? So we're going to see what they could do next year. But I can't sit here and you know how many teams immediately today would fire their current coach just to get a shot at Dan Campbell coaching their team? I would say at least half the NFL.
Would you fire Dable for Dan Campbell?
I would, Derek, I would kill you right now through our monitors to hire Dan Campbell on the Giants. And you know what? I guarantee you after this year, you would fire Sirianni for Campbell.
If Nick Sirianni wins us a Super Bowl, then maybe I don't know.
Sirianni's not winning a Super Bowl. Let's move on.
Obviously, what I'm saying is a hot take. I'd say so. In general, we'll just see how it goes next year. But moving on from this topic.